All right, we are live.
I wanna push you around, and I will, and I will. I want something about,
Whole
and I
song.
will, and
I'm
I
testing you. How well do you know the verses?
will.
All right. You've proven it.
Yeah,
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Hey everyone, welcome to the Matchbox podcast. This is a podcast all about Matchbox 20 and what's his name? Rob
Rob
Thomas.
Thomas.
Rob Thomas,
That was
yes.
a pull. When's the
Yeah.
last time I talked about Rob Thomas?
Uh,
We have a very young and tuned in audience that really knows
really,
both of those things
really,
very
really
well.
does. Yes,
Uh,
trust
so
me.
welcome to the Bias Cut, formerly the Matchbox. And this is a fashion podcast by two uncool losers who like
Lead
clothing
fashion losers. I'm Chris.
on weed.
That's Killian. How are you doing, dude?
I'm good. I'm a-okay. I'm ready to talk some clothing topics, give some hot takes, some biased cuts, if you will.
Well, and
Did you
I,
know that the title's kind of like a bit of a pun when you really
yeah,
think about it?
yeah, it's very Shakespearean in that
Yeah.
way. The Globe Theater was across the street from a brothel called the Cardinal's Hat because the top of a penis looks like a hat.
Oh
Cardinal,
no.
yeah,
Oh boy.
mind blown.
Don't you love like finding out about Shakespearean double entendres?
Dun, 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 dun.
Like there's just something special about like, when they're referring to a woman's lady parts and they're calling it like her mink stole or whatever,
Doth protest too much. That listen, I didn't come here to goof off, dude.
Oh, you didn't.
Here,
Okay. All right, let's talk then. Because we got
yeah,
some serious stuff to talk about.
yeah,
First off, this is I'm interested to see what you think about this.
yeah.
So, are you
Hey,
familiar with
where do you
I think it's
start?
called the 15% pledge? Do you know what this is?
No.
So this was I think quite 2020 sort of effort, right?
Uh-huh.
Where there was a movement, a very, I think, well-meaning one, to get fashion retailers to devote 15% of their shelf space to pieces by designers of color. I mean,
Hmm.
good idea, right? Makes sense to me.
It seems like a noble cause.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
I did mention that it's well-meaning, but maybe wasn't super effective. Like judging
Uh-oh.
by this write-up, there were quite a few retailers that signed up to the pledge. They said, "We're gonna get there. We're gonna stock 15%,"
Yeah.
and nobody's even close to that. Like they said they would buy the pieces from these brands of color, and they just haven't done it. um,
Um, and I want to say, for anybody who is listening or has received this broadcast through an alien transmission, we're showing an Instagram post online. We do this as a stream on YouTube. If you're only
True.
listening, you should watch us every Thursday at 8. Because we've got on screen. So hashtag or at 15% pledge. So it was grown, it was growed out of this designer Aurora James. I'm not totally familiar with her, but I assume she's the woman featured in this shot. The crux is what that basically designers of color were arguing that brands
Yeah,
or
so here's the pull quote. Only a few signatories, including Sephora, have given updates on how many Black-owned brands they carry. None has declared it's met its pledge goal.
Mm,
Uh, so with this pledge, they are shifting from just saying, "Hey, make sure you're stocking 15% Black-owned brands," and they're starting to emphasize the need for long-term structural changes over quick fixes. And I think my question to you is,
yeah.
why didn't this work out as planned?
Well, it's a lofty idea, right? Let's back up. I mean, if you're only listening as well, you should know Killian and I are white men. The the villains of society.
True.
But even as a white man, I can
Mhm.
say I can like go, well, you know what? I mean, like that sounds like it could be valuable. The argument was
Right.
that 15% of Americans are black,
Yep.
so why don't you show that kind of representation in retailers since you're going to have those customers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
My immediate thought is to stick a number like 15% and tell retailers like do this. It's going to be like nearly impossible for them, and
Yeah.
even if they have good intentions, which I don't think they do, they're going to struggle to meet that because they have so many other like coconuts hitting them on the head of things that they have to do or products that they need
Mhm.
to sell just to stay afloat. And to throw in like a variable 15% is a massive amount of their entire retail. For them,
Yeah.
it has to be not the other parameters that actually make a difference to us, which is like, does it sell? What are the margins? It has to be this other like X factor of brand started by somebody of color, which is fraught in itself. I think that the
Yeah.
obvious first thing is that it was hard to do because it was a really ambitious goal with no
Mhm.
obvious kind of through line as to how to achieve it, and none
Yeah.
are systematic.
So I think it's one of those things that worked. It got so many retailers to sign up to it because it's easy and it has that kind of social justice bent and it's saleable, right? It's a hey, 15% population, 15% shelf space. Why not? The fact that you're not already doing that is wrong. It's a wrong that you need to right, And so I'm
Yeah.
gonna sound very like lefty, like internet pilled right
Ew.
here.
Ew.
And but I think that that solution is like the going for the equality rather than the equity, right?
Equity. Hell yeah,
Because
brother.
it's just going for the pure 15%, 15% instead of looking at like why is it so hard or unfathomable to think of having 15% of these brands in our stores.
Yeah.
They are because it makes sense like they should. So really you should be asking why aren't they and what can we do to fix that from more of a ground level?
I think that fundamentally pledge is like is probably the toothless of things
Yeah.
to sign up for. They all agree to the pledge, and probably most of them recognize that they would never reach it. They just wanted their name
Yeah.
to like, and we care about you. But it is such a difficult task. It's like I know I've put together like collections, say for different holidays, celebrating different peoples, and even that, even like when you have a bunch of people in that demographic,
Mhm.
it just, I mean, like products or designers, it's
Mhm.
hard to make it all work because you're adding a new like search term to like what is required.
Right.
But I think that it's kind of like a cynical thing, and it just seems kind of like obvious to me that it didn't work because it was just too
Right.
tough, and because
Mhm.
that's not the problem, the problem
Right.
is
Right.
that they're not getting shelf space. The problem is probably that the only people who have even the remote possibility to ever
Yeah.
be in a position to be selling things as a designer are
Mhm.
much. It's a much smaller group of people who are not if white.
Right. Well, let's end this on a positive note and maybe think if they're shifting focus, what would be the most valuable places to shift to? Like, I think if just spitballing here, just brainstorming, no bad ideas, right?
No bad
Um,
idea.
I think scholarships
CEO,
would
replace him
make a
with a
lot
black
of
person. Oh.
oh, no. Scholarships would make a lot of sense. Maybe
Mm,
even pushing, making sure that there are people of color as faculty in these schools where people are going.
Affirmative action is illegal now, Killian.
Hey,
Do you
get
not
out of here.
read the
Get
news?
out of get out of here. And
Illegal. Um,
helping maybe grants, helping with sourcing so that people, when they have the idea for a good brand, they can actually follow through on it. That's a really hard piece. I don't know. What do
look,
you think?
I think that realistically, that companies are companies and they run on money and their only goal is money. And
Yeah.
that reality. And the parameters should have been something more like our effort is to explore or try X amount of bits by X people. And
Yeah,
there has to be a parameter where it's like the ones and we'll keep the ones that sell. Like
because it has to sell at the end of the day.
it has to sell. It has to be a
Yeah,
product that people want to go and buy, or it's not, it's not just like virtue signaling. It's also like
yeah,
there's no reality where it's going to work. It's like
yeah.
if Boeing was like, send in your submissions for plane ideas, and
Right. Here's the
nobody
thing.
any ones that work.
Things like this, because executives, they're very dumb people. I know this firsthand. I know you know this as well,
Uh-huh.
which means that things like this can occasionally do more harm than good. Because if some of these retailers tried this and it failed tremendously, every black owned brand they brought in didn't sell at all. There are some people out there that are going to say, we tried that, didn't work, throw it out, never again. You know what I mean?
Tried giving you quality. Try.
Literally, they're terrible people. It's not a good thing. It's just a reality,
It's a reality. I mean, you ever meet an old person? They're stuck in their ways. But I guess that's the positive. The positive flip is this. If they were ever going to do that, it has to be something that actually like makes sense for them,
Mm-hmm.
Because like I don't know, not quid pro quo, and I know we want to move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But just like it's a retailer. They would only agree to things that would allow them to sell more things. So there has it has to be like, if you do this, I'll give you this. There has to be some kind of structure that is profitable for them, that isn't just the virtue signaling of getting their name on a list. That's all they wanted, was the name.
There has to be capitalism within the capitalism. There needs to be a supply and demand for the supply and demand here.
Yeah, because rich people or executives, they're not going to make a decision out of guilt. They're not going to do it to do anything. That's not going to work on them.
Yeah, true.
I want to push you around. Next subject.
You know what? There is probably an NFT of that song.
Oh, yeah.
And that NFT, if it exists, is probably worth a fraction of a penny. Because NFTs are in the crapper, including all of the countless NFTs that the various fashion and luxury brands launched. We're looking at an Instagram post here that says the frenzy around fashion NFTs fizzled. How it fizzled. No surprises there. They kind of fizzled along with the rest of the entire NFT market. But
market, or whatever they call it, crypto market.
Yeah, I mean that's not doing well either. That's doing very terribly. Here's my take though, and I want to get your thoughts on this. If there was really any industry where NFTs could have and should have worked, I feel like it's fashion.
Mm-hmm. And we've never talked before. We've never met, and I've never heard about these subjects. But if I did, I would say that it just is like, that's the first inherent thing that makes sense. We'll touch on it. But if you say, hypothetically, we're going to enter a virtual world, and you might hypothetically spend money on a digital asset, somebody would have to explain to you what buying land in the metaverse is. But if you said, you pay this money so you can wear a Gucci jacket on your fake character, that's going to be like the first things that people spend money on, obviously. And
absolutely.
And you said to me in a dream once that brands already have the cachet to be like, yes, it's Gucci and it costs expensive. So
exactly,
there's an obvious translation.
Yeah. So, and the thing about NFTs, right? I don't know if I need to explain NFTs to anybody, but in case I do, they are non-fungible tokens, meaning they're one of one. They're not reproducible. They have a scarcity implied within them that is very much in line with the scarcity that brands try to create within their real life pieces. So brands like Balenciaga, they're in Fortnite. They sell skins, video game skins are not a new thing. If you just add scarcity to that, like you should theoretically have a recipe for success.
But
but I think it's about the implementation. How did these brands implement these that doom them to failure?
I mean, I honestly, this isn't a hot take. It's obviously already imploded. But when all the metaverse stuff first was being murmured, it's like, was every? I know they were, but how stupid and delusional up your own ass are you? Where all these companies are like, we need to spend $1 billion upselling people on a thing that doesn't even exist and they don't even want. You're already trying to sell them the accessories, and there isn't a platform or service or even hook. It's like they came out and said, "Have you heard of RuneScape? Have you ever heard of Second Life?" Have it. We're inventing it. It's like, when was this? They like legitimately companies went full steam ahead,
yeah,
trying to develop their markets for a place that they didn't even really consider making. I don't get it, but
yeah, it's
actually collapsed.
It's actually a fascinating idea that I hadn't considered. That probably one of the biggest reasons that it failed is because they were trying to upsell. They were trying to get net new money that wasn't there before. Whereas the way to make it work is if it's a value add. It's something that you're adding on top of what customers would already be buying that makes them more likely to buy it or to buy more of it, right?
Like, where are we going? When is the metaverse? When is it? Where is it? It's just so stupid to me. And I know, like I'm saying this, and it's like everybody knows this now.
Right.
Like, really?
But zooming in on it, right?
Okay,
Zooming in on it.
Let's zoom in.
There are legitimate use cases for NFTs that were just completely left on the table as if they weren't of value at all, when I think really they should have been the most valuable pieces of it. Like, first off, an NFT for a fashion brand should have always been tied to a real life piece. That should have been step one. You don't create an NFT just to be an NFT. It is the digital equivalent of a piece that you've bought from their website or their store or whatever. And then you can use it, since it is a one-of-a-kind piece, to show the authenticity of your real piece, or to follow it through different owners. Like you say, hey, Kanye West owned this at one point, and now it's on Grailed, and you can check that. You can be like, oh, this was actually, I don't know, Travis Scott's Utopia NFT for the jacket that he wore. I don't know.
But why would they do that? That's not inventing new money. People already buy clothes.
That's the problem.
Why am I giving them an extra thing?
But it's the same, like, these brands pay for Serta logo, at least some of them, right? Yeah. If anyone doesn't know what Serta logo is, like, they are licensing basically these QR codes that people can scan at the aftermarket or whatever to know if this is a real Moncler jacket or whatever. And I feel like every brand at this point should have that or something like it, and the NFTs could have been the something like it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I guess you're right. But I think that fundamentally, so like the brands that do that have like kind of like this digital tracking thing, and I don't know if like it's my brain or the tonight or whatever, but I'm not trying to be so negative. But they only do it so that they can retain a certain value. Like, those brands are doing it so that people won't spend money on fakes, and like the multi-billion-dollar of replicas, they can kind of cut some of that out because they've created a safeguard.
It's actually incredibly helpful to them too, because what it also does is it shows them where the fakes are. This happened to me once. I was at a thrift store and I scanned one on like a Stone Island piece, and it was like, this is fake. Also, here's a little text box. Please tell us where you are and where this is. And they'll literally go find it and be like, is this a place where people are gathering lots of fakes? And they could shut it down, you know?
The shit out of them.
Yeah.
I love being a narc for Stone.
Bring out the lawyers.
I genuinely, I think that it was like they were like Alexander the Great, and they looked upon the world and saw there was no more places to conquer, and they wept and they said, "Well, how do we make more money? We have to always be growing. It
Mhm.
has to be infinite, and
Yeah.
there's only so many humans that we can put clothes on the back of. So
Ugh,
we need to invent new worlds." And
it's
before they
true.
did that, they started making the products.
And they came so hard when they first learned about it because they were like, "We don't even have to make the thing?
They were like, "What?"
We don't even need, like, supply chains or anything?"
And they immediately started firing like the ateliers, like, "Get out of
Exactly.
here!"
100%.
I mean, I, we had a post up a moment ago where we were
Yep.
contemplating what is the future of NFTs? Why are fashion still into it? Because they jismed and they hired people who are on like at least like a year contract, 2-year contract. So
For
those
sure.
people are still working.
Yep.
But if I mean, that's like the other element of it. Is it a video game? Are we taught? Is the metaverse a video game? If so, which one? Because like I could understand if you told me, well, actually, this company makes a lot of money on Roblox, and it's like then they're selling Roblox accessories or they're
Right.
selling fork knife accessories,
Mhm.
but there is no digital like forum space that people regularly want to go to that's not like one of the niche communities, and there
Yeah.
is certainly not a access to 3D 3 dimensional the systems. The
Yeah.
systems are too expensive. And
Literally, at this point, I think the biggest bumps that these platforms get is when, like, a YouTuber like Ryan Trahan or Jarvis Johnson does one of their big, like, videos like, "I spent a week in the metaverse and I was alone because nobody's here." You know what I mean? Like, that's their big claim to fame at this point.
it's like the reports about like how Facebook had to force their like employees to go onto the metaverse. Like,
It's like, "Jab, damn please clap.
yeah,
Please
exactly.
go on, Meta."
Please go on Meta. And it's like, what the you know? You didn't even come up with a reason for me to go on there. Uh
It's a crapshoot. But, you said you're too negative tonight. You wanted something positive.
yes.
I've got just the thing for you because fashion has solved climate change,
Dude, this
okay?
is another negative one.
Listen to this. Listen to this, okay? It is gonna blow your mind. We've got a post right here from Business of Fashion. It says, "Big brands are taking back unwanted clothes. Where do they go?" These brands figured it out. Because here's the thing. Here's what happened. Let's look in on this. So these people, they followed these fashion buyback programs from like H&M and Zara, where these brands are saying, "Hey, give us your old clothes and we'll give you some sort of perk," right? And help in the circular, sustainable reuse, reduce
Circle of
thing,
life.
circle of life. So they followed all these garments. A couple were resold. Almost all of them were destroyed, downcycled, stashed in warehouses, or shipped to secondhand markets in Africa, which are already flooded with cast offs from every other brand and country on Earth.
You don't
Uh,
say.
you're surprised. That's very surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, I was in an H&M today.
Okay.
I was looking for something. Caroline needs a basic, and I was like in
Mhm.
there looking for it. And I was it was the one on Fifth Avenue and like 16th for all my New York heads. I could tell based on the space, like they're starting to transition into fall.
Yep.
There's just so much garments.
Yeah.
That are on clearance and they will likely not sell through. They're not going to continue to cut the prices. And I have to assume that that is regular for H&M, that they are going to end
Absolutely.
up with so many pieces of clothes that they simply do not sell and will not sell. And
Yeah.
that happens with to them all the time. Uh,
Every season. Yeah.
every season. I mean, you know,
And then multiply that by the other ones mentioned, Zara and
yeah.
Primark and Uniqlo, et cetera, et cetera.
Listen, it's hard for me not to just kind of rip into this. It's
Mhm.
fundamentally the fashion itself is
Mhm.
one of the most kind of costly products. So
Yeah.
it is already
In
off to
terms
a
of,
bad
like, I
start.
mean, and not necessarily financially, right? By costly,
No,
like, how
no,
do you
no, no. I
mean?
mean, like ecological and like
Right.
energy cost. Like cotton as a crop needs a lot of water. It needs a lot of land for the
Mhm.
amount of material you get, and it just needs a lot of energy. And people love cotton, and it just that begins with being a very expensive ecological thing to grow. And then often cotton things, like say a pair of jeans, those are taxing in terms of like what they have to do to prepare them and like the
Mhm.
chemicals they use to wash them and zhuzh them up. Not
Yeah.
to mention the cheaper it is, the shittier it is. So like that's what I mean. I mean that
Yeah.
already the clothes on our back are kind of a ecologically expensive thing.
Yeah.
And on top of that, of course, as we've all talked about a billion times, the price of clothing and the expectation of consumers is way, way lower. It's
Yeah.
much lower than it once was. People used to spend their entire salary on a single piece of clothes. Obviously, it's
Crazy,
better
crazy.
that you don't have to do that now,
Sure.
but people expect clothes to be dirt cheap. And
Yeah.
the result of that is it's made by slaves.
Mhm.
They destroyed their environment to do it,
Mhm.
and 75% of it is going in a landfill.
Yep.
And I want to not feel so negative. Guys, if you're listening to
Yeah.
this podcast at all, if there is one person out there listening, and if you're the
Help
new
us.
person listening, please help me. I like to talk about fashion. I like fashion. But I
So
also have to be like conscious and say, like, what they're doing is like
yeah.
more greenwashing. It's more like, and I pledge to
That's what I
only
was
let
gonna say, yeah.
superheroes in.
It's kind of a mirror of that first story, and I know you know this because 'cause you've also worked for large companies. So thinking about this fashion, like, buyback thing, how many times have you seen a company make some sort of announcement or take on some sort of initiative, uh, where they do the announcement, they get the headlines, and the headlines were the end goal, and that it's done. Like, that
Oh,
was the
well,
initiative, you know?
always. That's always the point. I
That's
mean,
what it is.
I think about this. I think about that when big brands ever talk about sustainability, it's one of the most legal, dicey kind of things. They have to
Yeah,
be very specific. And as a result, I know from personal experience that when you actually want to talk about how something was made more ethically or more sustainably, it sometimes never even makes it into the pitch because
no,
that is so hard to get
yeah,
every little guy to agree to say. So half of the
yes.
time, even if there is something good to talk about it, if
Mhm.
it is just they're not going to because
Yeah,
it so otherwise you'll see brands if they're talking about sustainability, it's a specific sustainability marketing campaign. It's
so
not virtuous.
you once told me, and I think about this semi-regularly, you gave me, like, the one tip if you actually want to be sustainable within fashion as a fashion consumer,
I
right?
said kill
And
yourself.
well, I mean, there's that, and you've told me that many, many times, but there was another
Mhm,
thing, I don't know if
mhm.
you remember.
Well, what did I say?
So you were talking about how, really, if you wanna do this right, there's only one way to do it, which is to buy less stuff, and this guy finishes my sentences, like,
Sandwiches.
we're just locked
Oh.
in.
Um, I'm just trying to I'm trying to give you space.
Give me the
I think
moment. Okay, I'm
I
taking my moment. I'm just
okay.
buy less things and make sure they're just made well so that they actually last and they don't fall apart so that you need to buy a new one at H&M next season,
Yeah,
right?
obviously, right? I mean, and that kind of goes without saying a little bit, but for one, consumers can't and shouldn't be held responsible for
Mhm.
the ecological collapse we're
Yeah.
experiencing. It has to be done at a government or like a large body level. That's the only way to make change. With this, that doesn't mean B, that it's bad to try to do things that are better or more sustainable or better
Yeah.
for the environment. It's not a bad thing, but there are a lot of studies that indicate that consumers, simple-minded people, we're all simple-minded. When we think
Simpletons,
we
yeah.
did something good, like for the environment, we'll end up actually kind of being more in the red, because then we'll go and like, drive our diesel truck around.
Right.
But I think if you are actually concerned about that type of thing, if you are concerned, you should just avoid the fast fashion brands, because they giving them clothes back is not going to result in something that it's not going to net out. It's not going to be like, I bought a bunch of H&M stuff, but I gave a lot of it back. They're going to throw that stuff away, almost certainly. They're not going to do anything that isn't for their bottom line, unless the government forces them.
By the way, this is us after we buy slow fashion. This is the car that we get into.
This is me after I went, I spent $1,000 on one shirt. Let's jump in our H1. Yeah. I think that at the end of the day, you need to avoid brands that are consuming products in mass like this if you want to be good. And we did talk about this before we got on the podcast. There are, of course, brands that are in their ethos and their design and kind of their drive is sustainability is a big part of it. And I don't think that that is what's the right word? Shitty. I don't think that that's just them trying to grab money. I think that probably designers or people who start these brands, they say, I want to do this, but I don't like destroying the planet. So I want to do this as ethically as possible. And I think that it's good if you want to consume those things instead. Of course, could delude yourself into thinking that you're stopping climate change, because you're not. But like, specifically for any of my YouTube heads out there, Ground Cover, the brand started by Avery Ginsburg, that's like their whole ethos. They use like pineapple leather. They like use natural dyes with everything. It was from the ground up built around being sustainable. And, there's value to that. Ultimately, I don't think what we do on an individual level is going to make a difference, but I think that we can set good examples. I think we can try to live virtuously regardless. And I like Avery Ginsburg was he was once upon a time the hot YouTuber to watch.
And that's the thing about like the brands that are actually sustainable, out of necessity. If you're truly doing that, you have to exist outside of the existing fashion structures. So it's actually quite obvious which brands are actually doing it right, because they're going to be very clearly apart from everything else,
And ultimately it's going to be more expensive.
Of course.
It's a reality.
Yeah.
I would say that, you probably, if you really care, cotton is a really expensive crop to do with the planet. And I think one day it's probably going to be a luxury textile, like legitimately. I just think that more people on the planet, the water is more valuable than gold. Cotton will be a lot more expensive. It's just, we're going to reach a point where it's like, I can't sell you Levi's jeans made out of 100% cotton for $50 anymore.
You know what? What we're going to do, I don't know why no one's talking about this. This is a $1 trillion idea.
I don't know why nobody's talking about this.
We're going to start a new Federal Reserve on the water standard.
Okay.
Okay. It's going to be backed by water.
Backed by water. And as long as there's water.
I want to talk about our big marquee subject.
Okay.
I want to talk YEEZY. Yeezy season. Yeezy season.
Yes. So
where do you want to start here? Take it away. I want to hear from you.
Yeah. On this podcast, sometimes we try to do things and,
True.
Success. But one thing we usually attempt to do is talk about a brand, is highlight a brand and talk about them. And maybe say something interesting if we're lucky. Um, and I wanted to talk about Yeezy season, the brand by the artist formerly known as Kanye West, in part because he and I divorced. We're divorced now.
Right. Right.
Not talk. And, you know, sad. It's sad to see him go, but I loved watching him leave. I think that since Ye is kind of like lost all of his credit, his social credibility, that his brand, whether it exists, and I can include all of the tendrils, like I include Adidas and I
Yeah.
include the kind of in this language. I think fundamentally has lost any of the cachet that it might have had when it was the brand of like the most trendy and one of the most popular musicians on earth. He's now makes bad albums and says bad words.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have any of that anymore. So stripped of that, hypothetically, what are we left with? And I wanted to talk about it in part because for a while, the kind of the consensus among critics or whoever, the internet, was Yeezy Season is a brand that's luxury-ish, and it was tapping into streetwear, but most people argued that it was derivative or it was not that cool or interesting, and it was only really relevant because it had Kanye's name attached to it.
Right.
So now that it doesn't, I want to know, why do I still keep seeing it around? Not just Yeezy Season, really, but I mean, like, clearly kind of like clones or things that are very similar.
The Yeezy aesthetic, right?
Yes.
So I'm so glad that you started there, because now I really think you can look back on it and almost remove Ye. Like, just say, Ye, he screwed it up.
Yay.
He's an idiot. Let's just forget him. And now that you've written him off, you can look back and say, was Yeezy season, were any of the seasons as bad as the critics said? Were they better? Like, how do you feel when you look back?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was Yeezy good, actually?
I want to confess some bias that I have, if you don't mind.
Please.
I've been looking at fashion for a while. I know all the things that you're supposed to know.
I know all the things, okay?
I do. I know all of the things. I was always kind of partial to that design, to those clothes. I always kind of was like, I would like that. I would wear that. And maybe it's because I'm boring. I mean, I kind of have a thing of wearing the same like t-shirt or sweatshirt, not the same one, a duplicate of guys, but like wearing kind of like the same bland, like basic clothing every day. There was something really kind of immediately appealing to me about that stuff, about like the idea of like luxurious streetwear that is very monochromatic and very minimal. And I'm conflicted. I was at least immediately conflicted because I recognize that it's like, that's not really bold. And sometimes when I think about like if it either is clothes or art or whatever, if my immediate reaction is I like it and it's not challenging me in any way, it might be lame. It might be passe.
It might be like lowest common denominator stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But here's what I'm wondering. Looking back, and maybe I can bring like this page back up. Probably from seasons 1 through at least 3, like at its most early on, was I think when you were most likely to hear the it's derivative criticism. And when I look back on it, I'm curious, if you were to look at this, what do people feel like it's derivative of? I mean, obviously, Rick is the first thing that's always brought up.
Yes, Rick. But also, everybody was derivative of Rick at that time.
Right.
It immediately rings like, this is Big Helmet Lang vibes to me. Like, if you look at his old shows, like The Warehouse, the kind of vibe, the way
like
that they look.
Like fishtail parka type.
The fishtail parkas. There's a lot about it that is very Helmet Lang, but also if you do look back at those collections, none of them exactly looked like this. So it's kind of, it is whatever. I don't think it's a 1-for-1. I think it's a derivative of Rick and other kind of dark avant-garde
Yeah, Hyder
designers.
Ackerman got called out in the chat.
Hyder Ackerman got called out in the chat. But also, I think that there's a lot, like, I think Hyder Ackerman was a source for a lot of this stuff, like the
Mhm.
2015 era close.
Right.
But I can understand kind of the lens where you're like,
Mhm.
well, this is just the biggest star in the world,
Mhm.
kind of taking away from other designers who are trying to do something interesting, and he's doing something that they perceive as being boring. But the other thing that I included in the doc that we use
Mhm.
is, like, I ask my audience, are you familiar with the brand Entire
Entire
Studios?
studios.
So they are, as I've understood it, as I've been told, Entire Studios is a brand started by two former Yeezy season designers.
Mhm.
And what they're making is Yeezy season by a different name.
Yeah.
And frankly, and maybe this is just my bias, maybe this is just me
Hit
obsessing
me.
over this, because I look at this stuff and I go, I want to buy some of these pieces. Maybe it's a price. Maybe it's because it's simple and I have to keep things simple in order for my simple brain to understand it. But it
Mhm.
just looks like, I just like the silhouette. I like the way that they look like they're cut and fit and probably will
Yeah.
feel. And I think the price point is reasonable. And to me,
Yeah.
these are some like shapes and silhouettes and like kind of colors that I'm actually interested in incorporating. And I'm kind of like I'm grateful that Entire Studios that these designers decided to do this. Another
This is an
example. Okay, go ahead.
absurdly attractive price for
It's
this piece,
I'm so hot. I'm so turned on
right?
thinking about it. Um, and yeah, I mean, frankly, that's not a bad price. Maybe I'll need to pick one of these up to determine, because
That would actually
also
be a great, yeah, I'd be curious.
that would be, well, if you give me the money, I'll do it.
Got you, baby. Kenny, you know I
Yeah,
got you.
but I'd like, one of the other things I want to say is, like, if you've ever like gone to a boutique and you saw like a Yeezy season, the luxury fashion piece,
Mhm.
it was very nice. It was
Yeah.
very well made, and it was
Mhm.
priced accordingly. If this
Mhm.
entire studio stuff is similar, I think that is a good price for that thing. Maybe it's
Right.
not revolutionary, but not everything needs to be, and it's not
Mhm.
necessarily lowest common denominator or ugly. Just being that. I had another
No.
point. I don't know if you want to say words.
No, hit I mean, I think it's totally fine for these pieces to occupy a similar lane that, for example, Helmet Lang has for the past 5-ish years or so. Like, it's okay to be an, like, premium slash entry level luxury accessible way into this kind of military, earthy kind of look, you know what I mean? Like,
Industrial something.
there's space for that, I think.
Yeah, I guess, like, I just have I never read a criticism of the clothes or the brand,
Mhm.
at least talking about Yeezy season, because everything, to Entire Studios credit, they've been seemingly getting kind of positive, like, kind of energy, like
I think so.
boutiques. They're being carried by multiple places. It could just be because that sells, but it doesn't seem like nobody's trying to dunk on them, at least from
No, not that
what
I've
I've
seen.
seen. Um, uh, what was I saying? I'm
So
so
I kind of
high.
wanna go. I
Oh,
wanna go
okay,
because there
okay,
are things
okay, okay, okay.
that are receiving, some criticism, I would say,
Yes,
and that
yes,
is the association to Yeezy itself. Like, I don't
for
know if
sure.
maybe Entire Studios has separated themselves enough that they're kind of insulated from that, but here's a really interesting one that you sent me that I'd love to dive into, which is this
Dive.
article about Dublin,
Double, W.
they and they put out this, balloon bomber here that is
Yeezy
very
Gap
similar.
esque.
Yeezy Gap, right?
Yes,
I don't know if they included pictures to the Yeezy Gap jacket or if it's further down here, but it's
I think
it's
they include. Yeah, you can scroll.
incredibly similar. They talk a lot about doublet, how much this writer loves Doublet. They're doing great work. I agree, by the way. I think
Yeah.
Doublet's fantastic, but they say, I couldn't help but notice the similarities between this jacket and the Yeezy Gap round jacket seen right here on Kanye West in black. But this is like the key one, the key
This
paragraph.
is the key.
I firmly believe that all similarities here are coincidental to be clear. Doublet's jacket is also available in Yeezy-friendly black and very uneasy green, but the Doublet and Yeezy Gap jackets both share a similar wide and cropped shape. So there's all of the
much
to do about Doublet and working as hard as it can to put away like, yeah, it's similar, but it's not the same at all, guys.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that the jackets are a little different. I think that we need to get a reality check that most clothes are pretty similar to other clothes, and they're only slightly different from other clothes, which doesn't take away from any of the merit of designers. But, you know, I mean, there's a million. That looks a lot like an Alpha Industries jacket to my simple brain. And also, like, the Yeezy Gap one was probably actually designed by Demna or his team, you know, right?
100%.
And we think he's a good designer, right? I mean, have we decided against that?
Well, let's go back. People may not realize this, and I wanted to hit it at some point. Looking back, and you might be able to throw more names into this mix, but going back to even the earliest days of Yeezy season, you're talking about Kanye recruiting Demna Gvasalia from Balenciaga, Jerry Lorenzo from Fear of God. There was
Virgil was probably
Virgil Abloh of Off-White. Early seasons, John Elliott was apparently a big help. It was like the big name designers gone on to do big name things, oftentimes similar to Yeezy season or derivative or clearly inspiring later. Like it's a lot of very respected designers.
Yeah. So it's like, it wasn't like there was a dearth of talent.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. And one of the other things is, a million years ago, I made a video. And the last video I made, I think in maybe June, I interviewed a designer who has his own brand, Bobby Cabbage Talk. And one of his kind of accolades or experiences was that he worked on Yeezy season. He worked on one of the seasons. And I like his work. I think that his pieces were super cool when I got to see them in real life. I think that he has a lot of interesting perspectives, and I think he's going places. I can see this kid going places.
I prefer his stuff to the entire studio stuff on the whole.
Well, it is different, but I guess my point is that I can see the relationship of the Yeezy design in his designs. Like he admitted that it definitely influenced him. But my point being that he's obviously trying more things, and we're only looking at a few pieces, but I had really cool stuff like with magnetic buttons that he sent me. The vest is obviously derivative of Helmut Lang, but the way that he did like his vest, I think is really cool. It is just the cut of it, the way that the weird Velcro stuff, there's just cool stuff going on. And my point is this: I see merit in this new designer exploring in that space that I don't think can be so easily kind of disregarded by elitists, fashion elitists. I
have one point that I think goes into that I would love to explore with you for a second, because there's this brand that actually folded pretty recently called ILYSM. I love you so much. They basically only ever launched one product, which was a like Tabi sock shoe here. I own them. There's one of my favorite pairs of shoes. And the designer came from Yeezy, did sneakers with Yeezy. And this was a great pair of shoes. I love it. But then there is this article that was quite recent. So he tried to come back after all his controversies for a season 10 show which this High Somebody writer attended. And there were a couple points that I really wanted to call out here. Okay.
Okay.
So he goes on to describe it for a while, but they start talking about these t-shirts that were worn here. The free in Yeezy Free, by the way, referred to the skin-tight white t-shirts that were given to attendees free of charge. They looked as good as you'd imagine they would, which is to say, not
Not good.
And then similarly, the sock sneakers that Ye himself has been wearing as of late were also seen at the show, looking about as good as you'd think soulless sneakers would look, which is the same insult as the paragraph above.
You know, High Snobody, obviously they wrote this prior to seeing my video. We all know that they steal my ideas.
Right.
Soulless shoes is actually the wave of the future. But
and by the way, these shoes look incredibly similar to these shoes that came out a couple years earlier even, and I think we're clearly informed by each other, and they're fantastic shoes. And they are clearly writing this article out of an understandable disdain for the person who is Ye. But
the person who is.
I think I'm just trying to make the point that there is an absurd amount of emotion that is caught up in this entire subject and how people are viewing both Ye, the designs, and the designers who maybe worked with him, that is really tough to untangle.
Yeah. I just had a thought in my head, like, in the future, kids won't, like, if I would, like, in 2015, Kanye West was considered the coolest dressed person on earth.
Yeah.
And, like, anything he did was, like, gold. It was like, it was a savant. And they'll go, you mean that Nazi who was president? And, it's just, I feel like I experienced something culturally that won't be recorded well, in the history books.
Not at all. Not at all.
I agree with you in saying that I think maybe that's the corn kernel of this whole conversation, is that there's so much bias in this cut. There's so much kind of emotional and not necessarily objective like analysis of Yeezy and the brands since the launch, that I think that it has always been kind of a conflicting thing for, like, kind of the brainiacs who write or think about or talk about the stuff to actually kind of place somewhere, because it has always been wrought. It has always been a difficult thing for people to kind of pin down whether or not, is this good? Is it bad? Now it's bad. Or, like,
and that's the weird thing. Like, I don't know. Do we need to say it? Like, we think that Ye, the person and his use, we think that's bad. We think the things he did and said are bad. We don't agree with him. We have not seen anything as of yet that shows that he deserves our forgiveness. Okay, let's take all that for granted, accept it, that's how we feel as normal people, as you should. And then let's look at what's left.
To clarify, the thing that he said was bad was I love Hitler. The thing that he did was bad was Donda. He did that. Deeply offended.
No cap,
guys. No caps. We didn't even talk about Utopia in this episode.
We sure didn't.
So when everything else is gone, what's left? I don't know. Maybe you guys should just think that's lame and keep buying stupid Chrome Hearts, and maybe all the stuff that I want to buy will become better priced. Maybe
Great
that's
question. I am curious. There must be a tracker somewhere that's like that tracks Yeezy values as a whole over time. I don't necessarily care about the sneakers. I'd be curious about the apparel, though.
Yeah.
Though
I also thought the sneakers were cool.
Yeah, they're good. They're good.
I like this stuff. And you know what? I only saw it because I have, like, just going on Pinterest, but I saw something like the later Yeezy sneaker stuff that I never saw. Like, it's not like the 305, 350 or the other ones. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. That's like, I mean, I think that if Ye had ever been good about anything, it was he was able to find people who really had their finger on the pulse, and he said, come here and make this for me. That has been his ill. And
And
you know,
for such a kind of I don't know, not to be like insensitive, like schizophrenic type of personality, like all over the place and unpredictable. Um, very, very clear vision in terms of his brand and his style for both the apparel and the sneakers. Like there was a through line from season to season and drop
yeah,
to drop, uh, that even some like real designers don't quite achieve, you know? And that's
straight up,
interesting.
straight up, it's lit. And you know, there's a lot of reasons why that could be the case. This was a very rich man making clothes,
And
and
we've talked about this a little bit, but John brings up the point that very recently Adidas made $500 million selling the Yeezys, the overstock Yeezys. So
that's right.
people still like Yeezy sneakers. And I think that's actually really interesting and something that I would not have expected, that it seems like people, at least in this case, are willing and able to separate Ye and Yeezy. I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, Porsche made tanks for the Nazis.
Sure.
Boss made clothes for the Nazis.
Damn right.
Mercedes Benz made Hitler's favorite car. Think of a German brand.
Volkswagens are good though.
Volks,
Volkswagens all
well,
ethically great, right?
I mean, the people's car, and the
Yeah.
people Hitler came up with them.
And the diesel cars that they made, they were
And
built
I
on
will,
emissions.
and
They didn't
I
cheat
will,
anything.
and yeah, yeah, yeah. You get it. Can we discouple them? Maybe we can, and maybe we should. Maybe that's my
Right?
point. You know, like, listen, the guy has gone mad with power, and
Mhm.
now he's hanging out with real losers in situations that look so ugly and boring and kind of depressing. Like there was that
Yeah.
picture at a mall, and it's like, dude, I am not a celebrity. I have no clout or money, and I
Yeah.
have made it a mission in my life to avoid places that look that depressing to me. And
So
you
I don't are you familiar at all with Nick Fuentes?
only
Only
vis-a-vis I was doing my Kanye video, so
right.
I know
So
that he's white
it's
supremacist.
it puts the sadness into such stark relief for Ye when you know who Nick Fuentes is, because like this is a literal Nazi who spends his days like in a button down shirt on a literal probably D tier live streaming site called Cozy, just like dog whistling to a group of like 100 hardcore alt right kids. You know what I mean? Like it's the definition of sadness, and the fact that that's what Ye latched onto
It's like,
is
dude,
honestly, I don't quite understand how it happened.
yeah,
I'd like to see the documentary, the Genius episode about that,
yeah, yeah,
personally.
exactly. It is it's a kind of thing where you sometimes worry that this person who you've admired and have thought like, oh, they have a vision and they're cool, when they start doing stuff like this, where it's like, that was the best white supremacist you would come up with who was cool, like that's like, that doesn't seem like a good get. That seems like a shit get.
Yeah,
Um,
sure does.
it does. It does.
So, we gotta end the episode. The final moral of the story,
Is
just don't if you're gonna pick a Nazi, don't pick such a crappy one
yeah, and then
to
there's a
latch
video of
on
him
to.
picking his nose.
Yeah,
So
lowest
there's
of the
that.
low.
Yeah, yeah.
Alright.
Anyway, that's our discussion about Yeezy season. I guess like my kind of abridged, if anybody like just wants one nugget to take, is that I think that if we not it was never covered objectively, quote unquote, and
Mhm.
that we should probably just try looking at these other brands that are basically co-opting the designs, and try to do it without all of the like everybody else talking in your ear,
Yeah.
because everybody else has like, they are influenced by things and they think they're being like objective. They think like, oh, this is good looking, this is bad looking. It's like, no, it's like they just are as simple as that too. You like think about like those all that Bape stuff, the like with the shark on your crotch, like
Yeah.
ugly, you know, like that's so
Rough.
dumb. But people thought
Yes.
that was so cool.
Yeah. 100%. All right,
Anyway,
ladies and
and
gentlemen.
Christian L, the messy thing, maybe next time. I think that's an interesting idea. But
Let's put it on the list. I love
let's
it.
put it on the list.
All right,
God.
this has been the Bias Cut Podcast. I'm Killian. You can find me at Low Luxury here, Low Luxury Clothing on Instagram.
I'm Christian, and this is your Pavlov's clicker telling you to subscribe to me and watch me on Brave New Wear on YouTube or Christian_Shabata on the Instagram. And that's the podcast,
That's
guys.
the show. We love you.
I love you
Goodbye.
all.
Good
Thank you,
night.
everybody, for showing